Hello, everybody. Welcome to Level Up EQ's first panel of 2023, Setting the Year Up for Success. Very exciting. We're happy to have everyone here. We're going to have some very lovely leaders introduce themselves here in a second to talk about strategies and best practices to set the year up for success and beyond. As a quick intro, I'm Marley DeFrucio. I'm the Director of Operations and Engagement Manager for Level Up EQ, and I run the operational side of the company and the operational side of these webinars and events. And I'm going to get us thoroughly started by introducing Marla, our moderator. Marla Skibbons is the fearless founder and leader of Level Up EQ. She's a master certified executive coach and a senior faculty member at CTI, the Coaches Training Institute. She's been training, coaching, and facilitating for 2 decades all over the world, specializing with executive teams in tech and biotech. And when she's not rallying our war cry for Level Up EQ, you can find her taking a walk with her beloveds, rock climbing, and just being an all-around awesome human. So Marla, I'm going to let you kick us off with an intro from us and then get our leaders talking.
Thank you, Marley. And I just want to say thank you so much for your love and logistics and making these panels and events happen, because without it, this would not happen. It would be a good idea. So thank you so much for that support. And I started Level Up EQ because I knew that the defining, I think, factor for great leadership is emotional intelligence. And our panelists are going to be here to help you understand, yes, you have great business acumen, but how do you bring the EQ to creating an amazing year and sticking to your goals and creating systems and processes that then you as a human have to stay with. And they're going to be talking about that along with what they do to actually make their year successful. And coaching can be a part of that, but really it's about what does the leader need inside themselves in order to continue to stick with whatever their goals are for the year. So we're very excited to have Marge, Tamar, and Todd here to talk with us. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves. But these are leaders that are exceptional in making it happen and creating the results they want to create in their lives and their work. So I'm going to kick it off to you, Marge. You're going to introduce yourself and then we'll move on.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Marge Anderson. I currently serve as the head of global people operations for a company called i5. And I have been in this world, if you will, for 25 plus years. Love developing leaders, love helping companies be successful, knowing that healthy people is a huge part of that. So I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Thank you, Marge. Todd.
Hey there. Sorry, I'll get myself off of mute there. Thanks for having me. My name's Todd Guerreri. I head up Box Consulting, which is Box's professional services arm for our software and platform. and I've been here for about 8 years. I work with Tamar, which is pretty awesome. Get to have her on the panel today too. And yeah, I've been leading the organization for about 2.5 years now.
Thank you, Todd. Tamar.
Hi, so great to be here today to talk about planning and kicking off the year right, which I know is on all of our minds, and fun, as Todd mentioned, to hang out with another Boxer. So I am also from Box, a VP on the engineering team. I lead our core platform, which is a lot of big, exciting engineering challenges, but also sort of the underpinning of the Box product. So we get to think across both of those axes, which is interesting. Been at Box for coming up on 13 years next month, which is definitely not what I expected when I joined, but it's been a fun journey going from engineer on the team and sort of laying some of those foundational elements to then building a team to own them, and then obviously progressing in my career beyond that. That's me.
Thank you. I want to just set up how this panel will run. This is a very organic conversation. I want you all off mute. And this is a conversation. It isn't like you're expected to present. I really want us to riff off one another. And the questions are our questions. And yet, if there's this great conversation going down another avenue, let's take it there and then we'll bring it back. So I really want this not only to be informative for the people that will be listening to this recording, but also informative for you all. You may learn something from each other. And so if you have like, oh my God, I want to hear more about that, by all means, grab it, because I'm sure if you're interested, others will be interested as well. So let's have fun having a great conversation. So I'm going to throw out the first question, and anybody can take it. It's not like it's going to be, I'm going to be necessarily picking you all. If you have passion about it, answer. So what's your organizational strategy to plan for the year?
Oh, I can take a crack at it. So organizationally, and just keep this in mind. So Box Consulting sits in the go-to-market organization, whereas Tamar sits in a slightly different organization within Box. So I'll maybe Marge, you might want from an I5 take a company perspective, but from a customer success org, which is what our professional services arm of the business sits inside of, it really obviously begins with the top-down sort of driving KPIs for the business, right? And so when you think about the organizational approach, there sits inside of customer success, Box Consulting, our professional support organization. So think of like customer support, and our customer success manager, which are account managers that oversee the health and success of our customers over the long haul. And so one of the things from a planning perspective that we get aligned on after we've determined at a company level what those priorities look like for a coming year is we get ourselves aligned around common goals, objectives, potential threats to the threats or risk areas that we have to concern ourselves with, and look at those really from a customer success perspective and say, okay, what are our overlapping or overarching commonalities? And then we tend to index where we can find the levers in our potential plan. So really where we're going to prioritize our efforts supporting the overall organizational strategy. So that comes a little bit from my boss, or chief customer officer, will help us get a vision for what that looks like. And then what we try to do is get aligned around that philosophically. We'll do that through, we'll do that through like an offsite where we get to kind of huddle and brainstorm a little bit about this. But again, it comes from overarching goals and objectives that align with the company strategy. And then we build our organizational strategy agenda around that. And then often we wind up going out into our individual businesses and then try to align and then stay connected throughout the planning process with each other, all the way up to and leading into our actual kickoff, which takes place for our business in February.
That's great. Thank you.
Great. And a lot of similar planning done in our organization, but one of the things I love is that I get to be involved in that company strategy piece, because when I look at people and their overall experience and retention and things like that, how well we as a company plan organizationally makes a huge difference in the lives of our people. So we as a company, I get to drive that process with our executive team, and we use the objectives and key results process, OKRs, that, you know, just one way of doing it. But we do set the plan for the year, broken down quarterly, and then we bring our next level leaders in, get their feedback to that, make any changes, and then they go back and work with their teams to say, okay, then what are we going to do to hit those goals? But then, as importantly, from my perspective, is it does trickle down to the individual. So they know exactly, like, not everything they do every day is going to tie into a company goal, but they can say, I'm impacting this company goal. Like, this is my reason for helping this company be successful. And we have found that very almost inspiring to the people to realize that whatever they do is impacting the company's ability to reach those goals for the year. And the other thing that I would say then is that actually drives our team's resource plans. So they look and they go, okay, if this company is doing this, then my team would have to do this. I can or can't do that with the current resources. So then here's the resources I would need, or we would need to adjust that plan. So they do have some say in what's possible and feasible for the year. And they don't feel like, oh my God, I have to do this with this current team and we're not going to be able to get it done.
That's great. Tomorrow.
Just maybe riffing off of some of the themes that I heard. I think like if we take a step back and think about planning at like a very dry level, then it's sort of a resource and budget allocation exercise, right, at the end of the day. But I think the sort of the unique element is, how do you get, with a larger organization, sort of more value out of that organization, right? And that happens when you have everyone applying their intentions, their creativity, their efforts in the same direction. And there's always this interesting balance of sort of top-down alignment, like, here are our big goals, here's what we need to do, here's what we need to deliver. But then also the bottoms-up perspective of, at the team level, I know better than anyone up the organizational hierarchy, like the specific context of what's happening in my team. And I've actually seen Box sort of iterate over the years on how to weave between those two and strike the right balance. And I do think it's an ongoing challenge for all of us. But I think for me, one of the key things I look to is to try to really understand that impact that we're trying to have at the broader corporate level or the broader engineering level, sort of within our various scopes, and focus on that, leaving room for my directs and their teams to figure out, well, how can they ladder up and contribute into that? And so I think as the more we can sort of leave that impact orientation in the way that we define goals, the more we leave room for creativity and for ownership at all levels of the organization. And I think that's what ends up getting a better outcome than if we had sort of dictated everything. But also to the point that Marge was making earlier, I think better engagement and better sort of self-accountability from the people on the team to ladder up into it. So I think in practical terms, there's often a little bit of a cycle that we go through, and kind of having draft themes and goals and focus areas, and then letting the teams work with that a little bit, and then seeing what they came up with and pulling out maybe some new themes that are emerging. So having a little bit of that back and forth, keeping some amount of focus for like explicit cross engineering deliverables that we all align and sign up for specifically, and then having some room for that's more thematic to let teams figure out their own goals within that, but still in a way that combines together synergistically to deliver more value to the business, because ultimately that's the point of planning.
Yeah. And I'm each one of you are speaking to something in a different way, or a similar way. And one is alignment. And I think this is crucial. And the other is, I think the alignment actually is in service of people bringing their hearts, minds, spirits to it in an engaged way. And I'm very much hearing a theme in there that autonomy is crucial, like that bringing them in, like obviously they don't all get to have a say on what it is, and yet you're giving them some level of autonomy in the conversation. And that's a dance for you leaders, right? Because I mean, let's say, here's the naysay, it slows things down. You know, it's not just like, here it is, go do it. When you're socializing things or creating alignment, and it takes time.
Yeah,
And
but
so,
it takes time to get it right. You know, you can do it fast and wrong. I've done that plenty of times. And usually the number one culprit of that is actually me, not the team. So just to be clear on that one. But what's interesting about what you're saying is, like, even giving them, you know, having the trust to give them the autonomy across the board. Like, we didn't even get into what you would do during this process run. Like, you're going to cross-functionally test this stuff out, right? I mean, tomorrow you were pointing out, well, I give, like, some of this process allows folks to kind of go figure it out with their fellow lines of business. And it's not always just within your line of business, but cross-functionally within my peers, we are pretty dependent on a few key stakeholders that don't sit anywhere inside of our particular org. And it's our job to make sure that you're creating the connection points, but allowing enough room for them to go make the connections, because that's in essence something we learned along the way, and it's incredibly valuable to the planning process. If you do that right and you do it relatively efficiently, you can certainly fit it into the envelope, you know, the time frame you need to get it done. And they usually come back with some, in my opinion, they come back with a little bit more crisp, clear sense of purpose that isn't always directly tied to just the goal. That's not just the OKR, but it's actually the impact that you're going to have towards the overarching company goals of, and yes, that can come back to numbers and things of that nature, but it's really about the impact you're having in our particular case on customers, or impact you're having on a roadmap, or on people's professional, skills and professional development trajectory, whatever that is. That's the stuff that I think gets people out of bed in the morning, not necessarily the specific KPI itself. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Marla, but it's like,
no, you did not.
Doing it right takes time sometimes.
It does. And I'm in Marge and Tamar, I want to hear you also. I mean, I keep just hearing relationship. It's, yes, we can jam an OKR down somebody's throat, but that's the wrong way. It's like, how do we allow there to be a relationship where there's some level of autonomy?
Well, I think it's also, I think that what you're raising, Marla, is an accurate challenge, but I almost see it as a little separate from planning. So the exercise of planning to me is not about abdicating control. Like, if you let everyone run off and do whatever they want, then like that's not going to work, right?
No.
So to me, it's more about acknowledging that I am not all-knowing, to Todd's point, right? So like, what is the perspective that I have on where we fit in, so that I can basically set, what do I need to deliver with the team, but then kind of carve out at the right level for the team to figure out how to best deliver that. So you give autonomy in the place where they have more visibility and more ability to own that. And if, again, there's sort of ideal and there's reality, like we all know that there's a difference, but at least from a directional perspective, I think it's about setting those goals in the right way that leaves the team room to figure out what they need to do to ladder up into it, which retains the autonomy, but doesn't have that, like, everyone goes in all directions. Now, I think the only way that works, though, if throughout the year on an ongoing basis, you're doing a lot of ongoing work to make sure that everyone really understands what we're trying to accomplish as a business, what the strategy means, what that means for the organization that you're a part of, and so on. Because only if people understand that can they actually then make good strategic choices within their scope. And that does require an ongoing, continuous amount of effort, but it is incredibly valuable, because no matter what you do, even if you had a perfect planning process, people are through the process of execution, everyone on the team is making decisions every single day that they're making on an autonomous basis. And they're either doing that with an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish as a broader organization or not. And one of the things I know at Box over the years, we've spent more and more time both sort of clarifying and kind of investing in what that strategy is, but then also in communicating it. And to me, I always reflect on one of my side jobs at Box is running the hackathon. And that's an interesting exercise because by definition, it's kind of like everyone do whatever you want for this 24-hour period. And in the early days, we used to just get very random submissions that were sometimes, cool engineering projects, but didn't necessarily have any relevance to what we were trying to accomplish as a business. And over the years, as we've invested more and more in aligning every Boxer around what it is that we're trying to accomplish, all of a sudden we started getting these very strategically interesting ideas from the team, and many of which we then subsequently turned around and actually put into our explicit plans. And so it was just this very concrete view in how doing the work of aligning throughout the year means that everyone knows what we want to accomplish. And then when left to sort of their own devices, as honestly we all are every day, they were able to make decisions that were a lot more strategically impactful. And then I think that also feeds into a better planning process when it's time for planning.
Yeah.
I love that. And I was exactly going to go towards the vision and the why. To explain why these are lofty goals, and they're stretch goals because we don't want to just, lowball it, but the vision behind it is what motivates the folks. And the vision, and then the revisiting that. I mean, isn't there a saying like you have to recast vision every 7 days or something like that? But, at our twice a month company meetings, we're tying it back together. We're reminding people, we have a weekly meeting where we have the leaders, the cross-functional leaders together, and they talk about the dependencies and, okay, my goal's impacted by this. Can you do that? Just that driving the relationships and the the interdependencies, but always starting with the why. And, maybe it changes along the way. Great, let's get back and make the changes, but here's why we're doing it. And here's the impact that this is going to have.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so very, ladders up to, again, what I think of is one of the best things about leadership development and our coaching is that we're always coming back to why is this important? What is your purpose? What's the organizational purpose? That's the aspirational piece. And that's what keeps people engaged, right? When they're in the dirt, in the carpet, they don't realize that they are, oh God, they're serving this whole beautiful tapestry because they're so in their own little tiny microcosm, making those choices that'll either send them off into drift or completely aligned with what the overall goal is. And I say often to my clients, you're the chief reminding officer. That's a part of what you do, is that you're reminding them over and over again, here's where we're going. This is why it's important. Here's the beautiful vision we have for what we're up to. And keeping people connected to that is, because then they'll be in the dirt in the car and go, oh no, I need to go this direction because that's going to serve what, Marge talked about in our team meeting. To me, any system will work, and the real weak link, I always say, is the biological link. It's the human being who runs the system. And you keep coming back to, all of you, either the engagement and aspiration of human beings, the relationship that we have. And what you were talking about is Marge, was that how we are interdependent with each other and affect each other, both individually in our relationships and how we show up, but also organizationally and how we operate in our particular, purviews. So, but it does come back down to relationship and communicating. You're all pointing to that. I love that, Todd, how you're saying you can do it right or you can do it wrong. And I've, done it both ways. And it does show up again that, if we show up in relationship with people around what we're doing and give them some autonomy to it, it makes a huge difference to the outcome and to the quality of the team in general. I'm curious if you each have tools. I mean, I hear OKRs, yes, that's a tool, but do you have a planning tool, a software tool, a worksheet you use, or anything like that that you could share that would help folks with this process? And I don't mean literally like you're gonna, download it on chat. I'm more like virtually.
Well, I can tell you, we go very basic. Partly, we're a startup and we, are sensitive to how many tools we use and how much the cost is, but we have a basic Excel sheet that we use and it works. And so we've just decided that works for us. Let's not make it any more complicated. I've been in situations where we've used tools and it just hasn't added anything to it. So that's just where we are in the phase of our startup. But we have it and it's accessible to the whole company. So anytime, and we update it weekly. So anytime anybody in the company can go in and see how we're doing against the 5 company goals that were set and all the high level targets that we have.
Great.
So just that openness for the company, like no secrets, here's how we're doing.
That's great. That's great. I was wondering, I wanted to hear like, okay, how does it actually work and how do you use it? That's great. Thank you.
This is definitely something that we've iterated a lot at Box on and within engineering. And I just, it's maybe my one takeaway from all of those trial and errors is that no planning process is perfect, and any planning process can be done well and can be done poorly. And a lot of the well and poorly is more on all the things we were talking about before. So I think I would recommend not feeling overly bad if your process is not perfect, because I have yet to meet someone who said, yes, we have figured out how to do planning with exactly this tool or this spreadsheet. Having said that, we do use OKRs as our sort of pattern of aligning definitely across the various functions of the business. And we've gone through a lot of different spreadsheets, PowerPoint, various box notes, various forms. We've recently, one of the challenges I think that you get as your organization grows is actually that sprawl can start in and of itself being a tax. And so we more recently consolidated such that all of our plans are now rolling up within Jira, or sort of the broader Jira platform. Since we're in a product and engineering organization, Jira is already a tool that's being used at Box for sort of recording, tracking our work. And so having a single repository where you can find everyone's plans, they're all in a similar format, is helpful. We're also in the process, another thing that becomes complicated when you get big is alignment across teams. And something that we've identified as a pattern that we think will be helpful there is actually stretching our plans out further into the future so that you're planning more of a roadmap and aligning on a roadmap across organizations. And then the quarterly or the annual exercise becomes more carving out that next joint scope of work, as opposed to sort of memoryless blank slate planning each quarter, which again, for a larger organization can start becoming a bit of a tax. So I would just say that it's an ongoing process of iteration, and that through that lens, you can think of it like anything else that you're shipping. Like, is the process serving the goals that I want? What isn't working well? How can I iterate on that and improve it? For OKR specifically, I think one of the things that's helpful is actually, for me, that I definitely do is just forcing teams to edit. Like if you have a team that has, 10 objectives with 10 key results under each, it's like if you can't basically repeat back what your OKRs for a particular period are, then it's not really going to be useful, because no one's going to open up, a whole PhD thesis on a weekly basis to remember what they're doing. And so I think there's value in focus and succinctness beyond what is often talked about with good OKRs, like making sure that they're measurable and impact oriented and so forth. But I think something that maybe doesn't get emphasized as much is just that succinctness, both in the number that you're signing up for. These are really the things that we're focusing on. And then also even just like the wording and the framing so that they're easy for the team to remember. And then they become kind of a rallying, focusing narrative throughout the quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just reminded me of something else that I think is important in this process. And I couldn't agree more. It's the few, the focus, but it's also then a conversation about what we're not going to do, because, they feel the pressure like, oh, we've got all these things. No, we're saying this is what you focus on.
Yeah.
Don't do this, and there's that relief for the folks that go, oh, okay, this isn't an addition to everything I have to do. This is the focus of what I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. Yes. Todd, anything you want to add to this?
Well, actually, Tamar kind of hit the nail on the head as far as kind of how Box generally approaches it. I think, the planning process, there's financial planning and there's a variety of other things that go into it. And we use a host of different types of tools, even to the extent of some of the Box products themselves lend well to collaboration, things of that nature. One thing that maybe I can...
What would be the Box products that you use that add well to the collaboration? Say them out loud.
Oh, well, we use Box Notes, which is interactive word capturing type of document, but it lives online and you can see where folks are adding to that. And so we'll use that for brainstorming to some degree, but we often use that to just kind of line up around our agendas, just thematically contributing to different topics and ideas. We actually have a new product called Box Canvas that we've been using internally. I'm actually doing, when we talk about planning, there's literally a planning offsite in the next conference room over. This week is my offsite for planning for FY24. And we were actually in Canvas today, seeing some notes from a cross-functional partner team inside of our organization, inside of our go-to-market organization. And we were looking at how are they lining up for the year. And he was able to just literally pull up, like, this is what we brainstormed around. We were talking about a particular topic, and we were able to go in and actually see their post-it, see where their heads were. And as we're starting to think about that very same topic, it's like really easy to share. So we do use a lot of Box products to collaborate back and forth, share view, things of that nature. But one thing that I maybe could add to what Tamar and Marge already highlighted is throughout the course of the year, or sort of how do you articulate your plan? There is no one size fits all tool. In fact, really, it's about communicating and keeping it relevant throughout the year. I think somebody brought up like being able to pivot, and it will come back to maybe some lessons learned and when we've gone through this. But I think one of the things we do is make sure that we are frequently incorporating these thematic messages throughout the regular business cadence of your organization. So if you do quarterly all hands and you do your regular meetings, you can come up with like a really clear, succinct one-slider that just reminds folks, like, here's our North Star. Marge, you talked about the why, right? We talked here about the unstoppable why, right? So if that why stays persistent throughout the year and everyone really feels still connected, that does tend to help you stay on task. So it doesn't mean that you always hit your OKRs and things of that nature, but I do think figuring out ways to keep it relevant to those different business conversations is something that you can use all kinds of tools for. So we're not really specific to one tool. However, we do check in on that, quarterly, through one set of, we don't keep changing. We don't move the goalposts. It's just something that we tend to iterate on and incorporate into all the other types of conversations we're having throughout the course of the year to make sure that it's staying relevant and that folks are reminded. You're the chief reminding officer, but are reminded of how we're progressing against those things.
I'm just wanting to underline, it's all about communication, and it's all about keeping it in, front and center, and collaborating and continuing to have an easy way to message, to look at, to re-inspire, rinse, repeat. That wwhatever tool, it's like you have to be asking yourself, is it collaboration oriented and is it communication oriented? Because it really doesn't matter as long as it hits those notes and it works for your organization, is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
So Todd, you alluded to this. This is like the question, what are the pitfalls and mistakes that leaders make that are avoidable when executing on a plan for the year and planning for that matter, before you're starting to execute?
Well, I was alluding to two things that stand out to me, and
Yeah.
I can elaborate, but I bet, there's a lot that we could all contribute to this. In the planning phases, some years you're going for home runs, and some years you really need to focus on singles and doubles, using a sports analogy there. But, you need to recognize the climate you're in, which we're going to go into we're in a very interesting climate here in 23. Our FY24, our years are funky. So I'm already talking about FY24 planning. When I refer to that, I mean this year. But when we talk about the planning process, is making sure that your ambitions are tied to the greater business objectives for the company. Because if you get out of symmetry, if you get out of line with that, I wouldn't say out of symmetry, it doesn't have to be always symmetrical, but if you get out of line with where that's going, it's just going to be very difficult to execute. And for that, I would say, for our particular organization, is we can complexify things at times, as we like to say. And so making sure that your goals are crisp and clear in the planning process is key. Now, on the execution side of it, because of that, if you tend to not have very clear goals that can tie and ladder up, at least at the level that we're working, that this group is working at, is an area that is an immediate, pitfall. In the execution phase, I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned is you've got to be dynamic. When things, if something is, if your environment changes, if the market changes, if even some of the things happening in your business are changing, you have to change with that. Even if it goes against your plan, you need to adapt those plans. Don't just throw out a goal because it's not working. But if there are other things that are clearly dictating that you need to reconsider that, it's much easier to pivot and be nimble and pivot that to fit the right environment that you're in, rather than stay with it in the hopes that you're going to somehow inevitably make it all tie together at the end of the year. And I think that that's something that we try to demonstrate in our culture here at Box, is being nimble and recognizing, okay, we're failing at this. What's the pivot that we need to make in order to get this to turn the right way? Maybe we took too big of a swing, to use my prior metaphor. It took too big of a swing. Maybe we need to break this down into smaller pieces because we're not executing the way that we should. So those are the two things that I've personally seen as gotchas on the planning and the execution side.
And I'll tag on to that, specifically talking about communication and execution. It is so critical for us to create the environment that our folks can say, hey, we're not going to hit this, or hey, these challenges have come up, right when they come up, and not wait till the end and go, well, we didn't hit that because of this. When we could have been nimble and made that adjustment. And I'm talking more on the team and individual level. And even then, we've done how to have healthy confrontational, communication between each other, because, sometimes a team will be waiting on another team to get something done, and then they find out they're not going to do it. So that has this trickle effect. And it's no, we have to be in this environment where it's okay to say, okay, I'm not going to get it done. Here's why we're going to need to change and be nimble. That was a big learning for us, to say, oh, we got to capture it at that individual level, not just at the high company level. We've got to know where people are at, but they've got to feel comfortable that they're not going to lose their job because they're not going to hit this goal or something like that.
I want to, before you go tomorrow, I just want to say that there is a school of thought that says, okay, we don't change for the market. We just drive at it and we're going to make it happen, kind of what you were talking about a little bit, Todd, not to do that. I don't know what to say about that. I think there is that fine line between, oh, someone saying I just can't make it because of them, as opposed to the market. And when do you let the market really dictate? I don't think I'm not asking you to answer that, but it is a question, right? Where's that line? Where's that line? I mean, it's unclear, like right now. What is the market going to do to us right now? We're not really clear. And so you adjust or not based on not clear, you know?
Yeah, there's an element of grit and persistence and staying the course. I'm saying that when you have exhausted all of those options, are you simply staying on something? Are you still staying on that particular vector, knowing that you're just going to fail and that it's not a pursuit that's going to yield anything? So you're wasting resources. You're not using your investments effectively at that point. I don't think anybody in this room or anybody listening to this is one to subscribe or indulge into when the going gets tough, you just bail. I think this is more about when you can read that, what do you do at an organizational level to lead properly? And I think sometimes you have to make the tough call that, like, this is something that, and maybe the tough call is to change or pivot the strategy a little bit to still achieve that same goal. I'm not saying abandon the goal. You might need to change your tactics.
Yeah.
And that is where being nimble is something that I've realized. Execution doesn't have to happen. I guess what it comes down to, we do our planning and we kick our year off on February 1. If it's in April or May and things are moving along, great. But by September, a lot of things could have changed. And there's no way you could predict in February how you're going to be executing against that very same plan in September or October as you're going into your year end. And so if you're seeing those things come along, I think it's our responsibility as leaders to effectively communicate that. Well, first of all, share it, get the feedback. You'll be surprised how many other folks might be seeing that. And then, talk to how we're going to resolve that before it's too late that you didn't have an opportunity to influence the outcome of that particular goal. So yeah, I think, but you bring up a good point. Like, sometimes, the market does change, but that just means you changes your tactics for the goal. Maybe not, it doesn't afford you the ability to say, well, we're just not going to do that this year. I can't tell Aaron, well, we're just not going to hit that revenue number this year because the market's a little tough. He would laugh me out of the room. So I think that's something that you have to kind of be cognizant of.
Yeah, that's great. Tamar.
It actually ties in a lot to what I was planning to raise, which is, so a lesson that I personally had to learn is, not all, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally as a leader in the planning phase and that goal setting phase, your team is not going to push to hit a goal you don't set for them. Like, there's this delicate balance of, if you want to, set an audacious goal, that's the only way that people are actually going to get creative and figure out if there's a way to hit it. And if you sort of capitulate too early to saying, oh, that's very risky, that's very fraught, I hear you. Okay, let's take a smaller goal, a less ambitious one, then you're definitely not going to hit that bigger one, right? It would be very surprising to exceed. At the same time, obviously going too far means that it's not actually a viable goal. There's no conceivable way to hit it in a healthy way, and something's got to give. Either you're not going to hit it, in which case you promised the business something you didn't deliver, which is sort of failure number one as a leader, or you end up compromising other critical things like your system health, your product health, your team health. Something's not going to work. But it was sort of interesting for me because I had to learn this lesson when I was sort of given the task of leading what I thought was an impossible thing. We sort of had to deliver on it for various other constraints that I convinced myself were true. And then I came to the team, I was like, look, this is the situation we're in. We have to figure it out. And they figured it out in a way that way exceeded what I thought was feasible. And it was such a massive learning to realize, well, where else am I kind of selling us short by not being ambitious enough? At the same time, nothing absolves you from good judgment, right? It's like, you still have to have good judgment as a leader. And I think the mechanism for good judgment is to have a hypothesis, ideally anchored in data, or some sort of rational thought around why you're making a particular decision. And then that leads into execution. So for me, execution, if you have an annual goal what does it mean to progress towards that during the year? You want to make sure that you're making progress quarter over quarter. And ideally, you're delivering incremental value. But what that means is not always that easy. And a lot of times, in a way, it's really you're delivering value by reducing risk. So maybe the most straightforward one is like, if you're a sales team, you have your annual number. If you hit your quarterly number, you're sort of reducing risk towards hitting the annual number because you're hitting those incremental additive sales targets. Great. Not all of us live in quite so, quite such measurable areas, but even if you're delivering a new product, what is the risk there? Is there something complicated about the implementation maybe that you want to de-risk first? Is there some sort of market or customer validation that you need to do? And so setting those interim milestones around an actual value delivery, often in the form of a risk reduction, like how could we fail? Let's pull in that risk reduction as early as we can, lets you then have a more reasoned approach to those moments that Todd was talking about where things aren't going well. Maybe that's actually according to your plan. Maybe you called out from the beginning, this is an open question, we're not sure. What do we need to do to be able to answer that question with more confidence? That's now our goal for the first quarter. Then we collect the data, we look at that data, we adjust our hypothesis, and then we sort of put the plan together as we go forward. And that means that as we go through the year, we should have better and better line of sight to how we can then with confidence deliver those annual goals. Or do we need to go back at some point and say, hey, Aaron, what we signed up for is not going to happen, but here's why. And I think having that narrative of how you're coming to the decision is so important because it drives the right level of thoughtfulness and judgment for you as a leader, but then it's also the mechanism of communicating to the team what's going on and why things might be changing, and also communicating sort of sideways and up on what's going on and what might be changing. And it allows people to engage in that process with you, where they're not just debating you on the decision, but rather they're engaging in the process of reaching the decision, which, I mean, maybe they have a new perspective or a new input, a new insight that actually together you can then reach sort of a different conclusion, but it allows more, it's sort of a form of transparency that's useful for bringing groups of people together. So my main learning was making sure that I'm not, be ambitious enough in the goal setting phase, but then be structured around the risk reduction and set the incremental delivery goals around risk reduction as a mechanism of delivering on that more ambitious goal without sort of being irresponsible about it.
Your execution should also incorporate in, Tamar's hitting the nail on the head on this one other element. I think maybe even overlooking a thing that you use so much more casually. We have become much more of a data-driven organization in the last 4 or 5 years than we were prior. It's certainly, Tamar's been here a lot longer, where we were like very, very much a startup. But in the planning as well as in the execution, there needs to be room left for how you use data insights to inform your decisions along the way to do all of the above. And you glanced over it, but I want to call that out. Leaving room for the ability to get that data insight is extremely powerful, especially when you're trying to determine, you were saying earlier, like the market. Well, if the data actually supports that, it lends much more powerfully to the next steps you may need to take, including but not limited to de-risking some elements of what your plan may include. So just a call out there. That's something that I think we've learned as a company more in the last few years, is how to incorporate that more readily into the regular daily use at all levels, not just at ours.
And even assessing, do you have the data that you need to support good decision making? And if not, you go solve it. Like something that I see for a lot of new leaders, especially when they get into a little bit more of a senior leadership position, is like, how can I sign up for an outcome when I don't have perfect visibility on everything that's going to be required? And like, that is leadership, because you have to put enough diligence into signing up for a well-reasoned outcome, but then acknowledging, like, here's the things that we haven't figured out yet or we don't know, and you're committing to the business that you're going to work with your organization and work cross-functionally, whatever is required, to collect the data, to de-risk, to execute, and to deliver. And also, if at some point you sort of exit the confines of what you're able to still commit to, then of course we all have the ability to kind of raise our hand and say, hey, something in the world changed. But leadership is signing up for that outcome, given the unknowns, and then managing to that impact with your team, right? That is the exercise. Like, no one can know for sure exactly how everything will play out, but committing to being nimble and looking at data and iterating and changing as you go through the years, adjusting, reallocating resources, reallocating budget, whatever is needed to deliver on that outcome. That is the exercise of leadership. And I think that's something that's sometimes difficult initially to understand, because it's like, I can't control all of this, but that's sort of how the world works, right?
I just want to say, I think that is a human thing. It's not just a leader thing. Often when I'm talking to individuals about making their own goals, either organizationally or personally, people have a hard time committing to something that they don't know how they're going to get there. I mean, even though we very much can say, I don't have control over this, but I'm going to show up and do it. But so many people struggle with saying, I'm going to commit to a result, even though I don't know yet how I'm going to get there. So it's not just an organizational thing, it's a human thing. And I think that's why people individually laugh about their resolutions, because they do make a commitment to do something and they don't know how they're going to get there. And by February, they're bailing out of it because they don't know how they're going to get there.
Very true.
Rather than do the due diligence, de-risk, do all the things you're talking about on an individual basis.
I don't know that people put that level of effort into the planning of their resolution. So that's at least something worth noting there. But
so true.
Maybe the resolutions would come together better if you thought through it a little better. I'm guilty of that too, by the way. So
well, but even if we say do a half-cocked resolution,
yeah.
What we're talking about is de-risking that resolution and then raising our hand at some point to say, it's not going to happen. Here's what I'm going to recommit to based on data now, just all the things you're saying.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have to be that complicated,
Right.
But unfortunately, it becomes very haphazard and on the individual. Again, the biological link gets wobbly and doesn't do what it needs to do.
I think we tend to all think happy path, like this is just, it's going to be fine. And then it derails. It's like, it throws you up. But I actually, I like that, even as individuals, just thinking about, well, what would cause me to fail? And how can I de-risk that is a good angle.
Well, I'm balancing. I want to make sure we end on time. Let's do a speed round if you can. So let's say you do fall into a pitfall moving towards your goal, organizational goal. How do you recover? How do you personally recover as a leader? Are there tips and tricks you can give the leaders listening?
I think, sometimes when you first have a realization that something's going wrong in a meaningful way, then it's jarring, it's stressful. We're all human. I think giving yourself a moment to process that and get back into a constructive mindset is important. And we each approach those differently. If there's like a buddy that you're going to go talk to, or a coach, or just give yourself a pep talk. I do think it's really important when you go to the team to come with a constructive problem solving mindset to challenges, because what you need is to create that psychological safety for the team. Everyone's feeling that oh no moment, right? But you need everyone in a problem solving, creative, ideating mindset, which is kind of the opposite of that initial reaction. And so I think finding a way to get yourself into that mindset to then set the tone for the team, move away from blame, but look at it sort of everyone on the same side, what happened, and what do we need to do to, triage, remediate, put us back on a good path, and refocusing on that impact as the goal. And then you'll get those good ideas and that good engagement from the team. So I think it's giving them a space to be okay and to move forward is the main thing.
And giving yourself a place to be okay.
Yeah, yourself first. Yourself
Put
first.
yourself
Like
first.
if you're in like, oh my God, we're, then no one else is likely to be able to rise above that. So, but conversely, you don't have to solve it by yourself, but you have to create an environment in which we are going to solve this together. And then that's where the team can come in.
That's great. That's great.
I agree 1,000%. And I would see, even taking a step back, being mindful that pitfalls may very well happen. And, I had a wise mentor once tell me the only thing I have control over is my own attitudes, behaviors, and choices. That's the only thing I can control. So knowing there are 1,000 different variables that I can't control that might impact this. So going into it, knowing this is our best step, but it could very well, become a pitfall, and just having that mindset going, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great.
I would say when I encounter a setback of some kind, one thing I've learned over the years is that everybody reacts to setbacks differently. So giving a little bit of space to allow people to react, however they're going to naturally be predisposed to do so, and then create an environment where I can provide as much context as possible, because I think context is key to bringing us from shock to back to growth mindset. And so you provide the context, clarity, don't sugarcoat it, but like we said, don't be bring a constructive mindset to the table. And then candidly, this is usually where I'm sort of predisposed to want to try to solve myself. And what I've learned, and I'd say as an evolving, growing leader, relying on the team more than ever here is where I, as their leader, can actually learn the most. In that very moment where you sort of pivot from shock and awe to, okay, digested, figuring out what the setback is, how are we going to go tackle it? It's how you react to the setback, not the setback itself. And so if you can get them starting to think creatively out of that situation, that tends to, in turn, bring out of me ways in which I can sort of collect those things in the best sort of, not to say we're going to go right to solution design out of the gates, but as far as just creating an environment where we're collecting all ideas to get out of, to counter the setback, and then go from there. So I think it's about that context setting is something that I tend to try to provide, because until such time, they won't all get re-rallied around figuring it out. So, and if there's literally one person left behind, they will actually wind up being the one thing that slows you down to figure out how to get out of it. So you got to get everybody in there in the same boat. Might take an extra step or two, but it's worthwhile.
So I want to thank you, each of you, for your wisdom. So invaluable and, priceless to hear. And I really am taking away, this is about communicating and collaborating and aligning. So much about relationship building and listening, and being willing to be iterative in the conversation. And then I wrote down consistency, review, adjust, and connect to the why. Because the plan is, I love plans. It's the execution part that's not so fun, because the plan's so shiny. It's so shiny and exciting, right? But then it's like that ongoing messaging, checking in, messaging, checking in, messaging, adjusting, and realigning, that is the lift. And it really is all coming down to that communicating with the team and being, it's not just one way, it's a collaboration. So I really walk away again with that renewed understanding and belief that I get from my clients, that it comes down to that emotional intelligence and that ability to manage human beings and their feelings and their focus, because it is really an attention economy. They're either going to be attentive to the goal and where we're headed or to their Facebook page, you know. So how do we keep them engaged and excited about it? So I want to thank you each for contributing to this. And then I want to say to folks that are listening, if you are wondering, how do you communicate better? How do you collaborate? Where are your pitfalls in planning? Level Up EQ is offering what we're calling a coaching starter kit for individuals that want to step into coaching. And if you are interested, you can go to our website and read more, levelupeq.com, and find out how you can jumpstart yourself in this planning and execution and being the chief reminding officer of your organization. And it's super accessible financially for even a startup. So please check it out. And on that note, again, Marge, Tamar, and Todd, you know, you have no idea who you may touch. Your wisdom, your kindness for being here, and your emotional intelligence is so needed and wanted by leaders. And so I just really appreciate the gift of, you know, the one thing not renewable in your life, which is time, that you gave to those leaders and to us to be able to share your wisdom. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And on that note, you are free to go back to your messaging to your teams about your plan and how you're going to make it happen. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. Take care. And
Yeah, my privilege. Bye-bye.
Thank you.